Hello everybody, I'm Captain Jack Cooper with Team Liberty Outfitters and Team Liberty Guide Service, and today we're going to talk about the three basic types of topwater baits used for saltwater inshore fishing that are the most common. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to choose which one you should be using where you're fishing. So the three basic types of baits you have are your walking baits, which is like your Super Spooks and your Rapala topwater walkers, and then you have your chugging or spitting baits. And now those are baits that have a little mouth cut out in the front, a little depression cut out in the front. And here's a real good example of one with a nice big wide depression cut in the front of it with a lip around it. And so what happens with these baits is they're chugging or spitting baits. When you work them, they just chug out or splash out water in front of them. That's the action that they make. Plus they do walk just a little bit. So those are the two most common. Now the third is a bait called a propeller bait, a prop bait. And that's like your buzz bait, tandem blade or single blade, which the tandem blade does get thrown in the inshore tournaments and stuff often. And then you have a hard bait that is split in the back with a propeller on it where the whole back of the bait turns. And I don't have any of those. I don't use those. I will throw a buzz bait from time to time, but the two most common I use are your walking baits and your chugging baits. So let's get it right into it. So the rig up. Let's talk about the first thing you're going to do is tie your bait onto your rod and reel. And your rig up with that is done two ways. So you'll either have a split ring on the front of your bait. A lot of them come out of the box that way. Or you'll just have the loop that is molded into the front of the bait. So those are generally two ways that you're going to rig up these baits. Now a lot of people, if their bait comes with a split ring already tied on it, a lot of people will take that off because they believe that that bait will run nose down and not work properly with that little bit of weight that's coming from that split ring. I think you have to use your baits and find it out and figure that out for yourself, and not just arbitrarily take the split ring off. That's my opinion. I use the bait however it comes out of the package. If it has a split ring on it, I use a split ring. If it doesn't, I don't worry about it, because I have yet in my time using topwater lures determined that the split ring has added too much weight to anything I've been using. So I therefore use them. If it's got one out of the package, I use it. Now the upside to having a split ring is you can tie whatever knot you want to that split ring. You can tie a double trilene knot, single trilene, you can tie a loop knot, you can tie a uni knot, whatever you like to use, you can tie to that split ring, because that split ring gives that bait the freedom of movement to provide the action that you need to draw a strike from that fish. Now, on the other hand, with the attachment point being molded into the nose of the bait and not having a split ring on it, you need to tie, in my opinion, what's called a loop knot. And a loop knot comes through the eye of that bait and gives it the freedom it needs to move back and forth. Where if you put a big cinch down, a big uni knot on the front of that bait, you're not always going to give it the freedom of movement it needs. Now you're relying on having slack in your line to give it freedom of movement, and you're not going to have that slack when you're working that bait. So that's where you need the loop knot. The loop knot gives that bait freedom of movement to move back and forth and produce the action you need to get a strike. So those are the two basic rig ups, without a split ring and with a split ring. Okay? Now let's talk a little bit about the important thing, size. Does size really matter? That's the age-old question. And I'm going to say yes, but it depends on the circumstances. So if it's a bluebird calm day flat, you can use any size topwater bait you want. Smaller, medium, large, whatever. And so conditions change, bait size needs to change. So if the wind picks up and you've got a lot of chop on the water, and that smaller bait is not going to produce the type of noise and action that you need to get that desired strike. So you're going to have to upsize your bait and get a bait that's a little bigger, and it's going to produce more noise in them wind conditions. And you may want a bait that's that's got a rattle in it, that's going to produce more noise while you're working it when that water picks up and that wind picks up and starts putting waves on the surface. So that, and you're always going to want to try and match the hatch as best you can. And what I mean by that is what bait's working in your area that the fish are feeding on. How big is that bait? What color is that bait? You know, if the water's clear, you're going to want to try and match that hatch color side as best you can. So, you know, but then you've got your environmental factors that's going to dictate down the road if you're going to have to upsize your bait or if you can stay with a bait presentation that's the size of the hatch in your area. Now let's talk a little bit about color. I will always 100% of the time try to match the hatch first. That's me. But you know, I can only really match the hatch if the water's clear, in my opinion. If the water's clear, I'm going to use the rules that I've used in my lifetime for topwater fishing that have worked for me. Or if the water's clear, I'll use a lighter, more natural bait, such as this mullet. This mullet colored bait has been a really, really good topwater bait for me when the water is clear and the water is calm. All right, this natural color, lighter color, works very good for me in clear water. Now, if I'm matching the hatch and I'm not catching fish, I'm not getting strikes, then I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to go to something completely different, such as this Plum Crazy Purple. And I'm going to throw that in that clear water and see what that does for me. And I'll just, you know, topwater baits are going to work. I'm going to change colors and I'm going to change sizes until I start getting the desired strikes that I'm looking for. When the water's dark, stained, dirty, I'll go to a darker colors, your dark blues, your blacks, and your chartreuse and your fluorescent colors. But I will start with the darker colors first and then move into my fluorescent colors and my chartreuse colors. So that's what I've got to say there for you about choosing the color of your topwater bait. Now let's talk about rod selection a little bit. And these are my preferences, and these are things that I've learned over a lifetime of fishing bass tournaments, redfish tournaments, trout tournaments, and fishing all over the world. When it comes to using topwater baits, I personally prefer a medium action rod, and I will tell you why. A medium heavy action and a heavy action rod, they work too fast, in my opinion. So, you know, you're watching your bait, you're working your bait as best you can, and you witness that strike, and your instinct is to set that hook. But if you're using a medium heavy or heavy action rod, 9 times out of 10, you're going to pull that bait away from that fish before he actually has a chance to grab a hold of it, and you can possibly even pull hooks out of his mouth. A medium action rod loads up, takes longer to load up, and that reaction is just that little bit slower enough to allow that fish to get that bait in his mouth and allow you to load up on him and get a good hook set without ripping those hooks away from him. So that's why I like a medium action rod. Now, an important part of that rod selection is your butt. So when you're talking about the butt of your rod, you're talking about from your reel seat back. All right, that's the butt section of your rod. So this section of your rod needs to be fairly short. And the reason I say that is the average size person that's fishing doesn't have real long arms, and so if you're going to be working this bait for countless amount of time, so you've got wrist, elbow, shoulder joints that are going to get fatigued over time, and so the lighter the rod, the better. That short butt section, what that's going to do is that's going to keep that rod out of the way. As you're working it, if you've got a real long butt, you're hitting yourself in the ribs or in the armpit or in the stomach or around your chest, you know, you're not working that bait the way you need to. That rod butt needs to lay right down your arm and stay out of the way while you work that bait. You don't want a real long rod, the shorter one that you can get. All right? So that's what I've got to say about your rod selection. Just remember, I prefer medium weight, and like I said, why? It takes a little bit longer, a split second longer to load up and allow that fish to get that bait a little more in his mouth. Talked about the length of your rod. I use a 7 foot, and you want it to be lightweight and have a short rod butt. My personal preference is this Falcon Buku SR. Has been a great rod for me. It's super lightweight, It's got a short butt section on it. Now, let's talk about your reel selection. You know, I'm not going to get into speed retrieve ratios or any of that. My big thing when it comes to selecting a reel for anything, especially when it comes to topwater fishing, is you want to select a reel that you are comfortable with, that you are competent and capable of using and casting accurately. Whether that be a bait caster or a spinning reel. It doesn't matter either way. You just have to use your setup and practice with it and get good with it. Walking that bait, moving that bait, manipulating it, and setting the hook. So the key is to use a reel that you are competent and capable of using and that you can accurately cast with. My setup that I use most of the time is this Falcon Buku SR rod, 7-foot medium action, and a Quantum Smoke inshore spinning reel. That's a very basic combination, works great for me in a lot of different conditions. So let's just recap. We've talked about the three basic types of topwater lures. You've got your walking, your chugging or spitting, and your prop baits. And then we discussed rig ups, how to tie them on. We discussed lure size. We discussed lure color. We discussed rod selection, reel selection. And you know, I know somebody's going to come back and ask me, what do I do for a leader? Well, there's two schools of thoughts on a leader. You've got your monofilament leader and you've got your fluorocarbon leader. Your fluorocarbon leader will sink a little quicker than your monofilament leader will. But when you're using a bigger topwater lure, I don't think that matters. You just want to use whatever you're comfortable with using. What you already own will work just fine, all right, when it comes to leaders. So I hope the things that I've discussed with you today and that I've shared with you help you catch more fish. But more than that, I hope that something I've shared with you helps you enjoy your time on the water more. If you have any questions, you can email them to me at teamlibertyjack@yahoo.com, or just put them in the comment section of the video and I'll reach back out to you. I'm willing to share any knowledge I have with any type of fishing I do. You know, I've learned everything the hard way. I've learned it on my own. I've had the old timers share a lot of knowledge with me. I have friends that are guides with me. We share knowledge back and forth. So I'm willing to share knowledge with you folks. If there's something you want to ask, just ask it, and I'll answer your questions as honestly and quickly as I can. So I want you to remember, anytime you get a chance to take a youngster fishing, please do so. And let's get those younger generations hooked on the outdoor sport of fishing that we all love so much. And thanks for watching. As always, God bless you. May God bless your family and the United States of America. Thank you.